Good morning. I hope everybody is doing well. Thank you so much for coming along today. So I'm running the session. We're going to do an introduction to CashCalc. There is a chat box and a questions section within the system. Please feel free to put in as many questions as we go through, and I will stop at certain points to answer any. I've got the agenda on the screen here, but loosely the order that we're going to follow is just general finding your way around CashCalc. We'll then use the IO integration to pull through a client that I already have on file. We do have integrations with several other back office systems, but IO is the one that I have set up, so I'll use that one. We'll then have a look at the onboarding side of CashCalc, which refers to our client portal. So this is where clients can share fact-find information, you can share documents, it's two-way, so clients can share documents with you as well. And then we're going to use that information that we've gathered via the onboarding to build out a cash flow model. We do have two cash flow modelers, one that works on a net basis where you would need to essentially calculate all the net figures and build the forecast that way. And the other forecaster that we have is a gross cash flow modeler where we'll calculate most of the tax for you. So I'm going to focus on the gross cash flow today. It is the forecaster that is getting more development input over the course of next year. So I may show and discuss some of the enhancements that we've got coming in that space. We've had lots go live this year already, but there is still more coming. So I'm gonna make a start. We've got 30 people in the webinar. So as I say, any questions, just pop them in. I've got a colleague in who is somebody said I'm muted. I'm hoping that's not still the case.
I can hear you, you're good.
You can hear me? Perfect, thank you. And Jacob, before we get started, can you confirm, is this session going to be recorded?
Sorry, yeah, it will be, and we'll share the recording with everyone afterwards.
Perfect, excellent, thank you. Okay, so let's make a start. I'll close out of that. So this is the home screen of CashCalc. This is the first page that you're going to see when you initially log in. And there are a few things that I would recommend setting up under the settings section. I'm having more reports of there not being any sound. I don't know what's going on. Worries. Okay, so there are a few different things that we can do in the first instance when you first get into your account, just to set things up and make things a bit smoother as you go through the process. So within the account, you'll see a couple of metrics as to how you've been using the system, the volume of funds that you've added, and there are also some sort of quick things to get you started over here. Under the resources section, we have all the details of our customer support team who are very, very quick to answer queries should you have them. You might also have a key contact here at CashCalc as well, but there are other resources. By clicking into your initials, you can go to FE Fund Info Advice Hub TV, which used to be called CashCalc TV and was far less of a mouthful, but we've got loads of videos in there. It takes you to our YouTube channel, and we record a lot, and we've got a lot of videos in there already. But under settings, some of the things I would recommend setting up if you're very new to CashCalc is to first go in and apply your branding. This will then change the FE Fund Info branding that would be sitting up here in this corner, as well as on any reports, invitations to the client portal. It will put your branding there, and that'll just really quick to upload. You can also set up your integrations with back offices from here. As you can see, I've got the IntelliFlow one that is installed and activated. Essentially, you would just come to this page. It would have an install button. Click that. It'll ask you to log into IO, grant the T's and C's, and then you're set up and good to go. The integrations that we have with back office systems do tend to sever over a period of time. So for IO, for example, that is every 28 days, and or if a password is changed on either system. It's just a security feature, and the way around that is just to click relink and then you're back up and running. It is as simple as that. For anybody who is wanting to add a couple of additional questions to the base fact find that we already have on file, you can come in here and build templates. So you can add extra questions, you can remove sections. You can see here we've got, you know, a mortgage fact find that is a bit more specific for mortgage clients, where we're asking less about pensions and more about properties. And a bit further down under investment proposition, this is where you would go if you want to build in things like your own variable growth templates or very specific market crashes to use for stress testing. So now that I have my integration set up with IO, the benefit of doing that is when I come to adding in a new client, rather than manually keying all of that information in, I can click to import from the back office, search for the client, and it will find them in IO, and I can add the client. Now, if your client is, you're working on behalf of a joint client, a married couple, for example, you can at this stage also include a partner or spouse and do the exact same thing, find the other one. But in this case, it is an individual client, and I'll add her in. If I hop over now to the info tab, you'll see an updated net worth, and I can work my way along each of these tabs and see all of the information that's pulled over. So the servicing tab will act almost like a diary for you to keep against the client. So you can put in notes in relation to the last conversations you've had. You can store up to 5 key documents if you need to keep a form of ID on hand, things like that. And you can also schedule reviews. Scheduling a review will ask you when the next review date is and if there's anything you need to send that client in preparation for the review meeting. So if you want to send the client a notification a week before the meeting to say, can you check your fact find, make sure everything's up to date, the system will automate that process, providing you've gone through this step. Risk profile, we'll get onto that during the onboarding journey, but we do have an ATRQ available within the onboarding process of CashCalc. It is powered by eValue. Investments, this particular client has a chunky ISA, a nice pension, and a very, very lovely property. We'll also pull through information in relation to liabilities, income, salaries, expenses. But for now, we're going to invite this client to provide any additional information via the fact find. So if I hop over to the onboarding tab along the top here and click to invite to the client portal, we have 2 options when inviting the client to the portal. We can either email them via CashCalc, which is going to send them this email here, which is branded with your branding, mentions you as the advisor, and also mentions the word secure or securely about 4 times. So everything in CashCalc is encrypted both in transit and at rest. So it is really a safer space to be sharing sensitive information. and this would be the email that would be sent. If, however, you want to receive a URL and fire that over, you can choose to do it that way, which is what I'm going to do in this case. There is a verification needed for both, regardless of which method you choose. So in this case, I'm using the client's email address as the verification code. You can choose telephone number as well. Below this, we can now toggle on all the things we want the client to engage with. So first of all, I want the fact find. And at this stage, if you have created templates, this is where you would change it. So you can choose which template you want to send, but I am sticking to the base fact find. Documents, I've got a couple of documents here. Now, these were preloaded into that settings section that I showed a moment ago. So that's another good thing to sort of do at the start of the process. If you've got documents that are, it's under disclosure documents, if you've got documents that are just frequently used, don't really need editing from client to client, you can upload them to your CashCalc account and they'll just appear here for toggling on without you having to browse the folders of your computer to find the same welcome brochure, terms of business, privacy policy every time. But if you do have a very bespoke document for a client, we can choose to send a new document and choose a file in the computer and fire it off that way. You will also notice that some of these documents require agreement, and this is just going to give the client the opportunity to agree to the document, and it will watermark it with a bunch of information, which I'll show in a moment. Refers to anything with a URL that you might want the client to have a look at. So that could be a link to a video, a news article, your website, anything like that. So anything with a URL you can put in there, and you can also supply some instructions if it is quite specific what they need to do with that link. The ATRQ is powered by eValue. For anybody who is using FE Analytics and is familiar with the investment planner, it is the same ATRQ that sits within there. We do also have an integration between those two processes as well. So if you've historically used the investment planner as a means to ascertain a client's attitude to risk, but you're wanting to switch to using the client portal, you absolutely can do that and then tell the investment planner this is their results, and the two are linked, and then you can complete the process in the investment planner. The ethical screening questionnaire is it's going to give you an idea as to how important ESG matters are to a client. So it's quite a short questionnaire, but it starts that conversation. And we do also have an integration with a company called Credas who perform AML checks. This is one of the only features in the system that comes with an extra cost. It is and it is pay per check, but it's the full AML check, PEP check, ID verification, sanctions list, all of that. So sending the invitation, I did choose to receive a link myself and send it that way. So nothing has actually been sent over to the client at this stage. The invitation link is here. So everything you see from this point onwards is what your client would do when they receive the link. So they receive the link and they put it into the browser. And this is the initial claiming of that invitation. So first of all, the client is going to need to put their email address in, which we used as the verification method. They'll then need to set a password. Agree to the T's and C's, the privacy policy, and click confirm. So another thing to mention is that the branding is applied on the portal. The color scheme is also applied at the portal level as well. So again, another thing that you can set up in the settings under portal preferences. If you can go as detailed as putting in a hex code, so it is exactly a match to your branding, so it all looks on brand. So once the client has set their password, they'll then need to actually log in, and this is the first page they're going to see in that client portal. So everything requiring attention is sitting front and center under this action section, and as we work our way through each of these parts, it will shift them off the to-do list into their relevant subtabs over on the left-hand side. So I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. We've got a fee agreement, which we can just click, I confirm I've read and understood this document, and we can accept that. Then vanishes from here and now sits under my documents. The privacy policy, I'm going to confirm that I have read and understood it, but decline that agreement and say, can we discuss? Sustainable investing. Let's say we don't currently have any experience with this, but we are interested in it. The questionnaire will then go on to ask which topics are particularly important to you, but the client can also say they are broadly interested in a variety. We then have the investment approach, i.e. how important are those topics to us in relation to our investments. So I'll say I want to make a positive impact by avoiding specific areas that support my views. And then we can order the priority. Let's say we want to avoid controversial business practices and be low cost, and then a client can pop in any notes there. It will then at the end give a result sort of on a 1 to 5 scale. And as I say, it's not then going to tell you, well, these are the suitable portfolios for this client, but it does give you an idea as to how important these ESG matters are to individuals. So we are now building up a profile for this client. If I go back to the dashboard, just 2 things left to work through. ATRQ, I'm going to go just sort of down the middle on each one. And as I say, it is the ATRQ powered by eValue. You may have seen I had the option to toggle on or not toggle on the capacity for loss and knowledge and experience sections. I chose to keep those added in. So it will go on to ask those questions, but you can choose to keep those out if you prefer. So say no to any of these. And the client can then review their answers and submit that. Unsurprisingly, I have gone down the middle in every single question, so I'm going to assume it's a 3 out of 5, which it absolutely is. So it will then just give you the typical asset mix and some information about what a moderate 3 out of 5 investor sort of looks like. So the star of the show, where the portal is concerned in my eyes, is our fact find. So I do tell this story quite well often, but it is genuinely true. When I applied for my mortgage, which was nearly 8 years ago now, I had to take half a day's annual leave to sit in a NatWest in the middle of Newport town centre and do a fact find. And a lot of the information, I felt I could have probably done that at home on the sofa. Now, this portal gives clients the ability to do that. So it's built with the view that people without a financial background would be able to answer the questions. It's also, we know that it takes the average client 16 to 18 minutes to complete it. It saves as you go along as well. So if they can't do it all in one go, that's not a problem at all. But essentially, within the fact find, it is dynamic, so it will sort of change depending on what information a client has put in previously. So I'll work my way through. We've got the clients, and bearing in mind, because this client has been pulled through from the back office system, it is part populated. So we do have quite a lot of detail in here already, but I'll go in and add a dependent. We then have information relating to the client's employment. Now, this is a good example of where things will change depending on what you put in. So I'll pop in a national insurance number, but if I tell the system, well, this client is employed as a sole trader, it's going to ask a slightly different set of questions versus if they were retired already, it's going to ask a different set again. But in this case, the client is employed and her desired retirement age is 60, but she's fairly confident if she retired at age 67, when the state pension kicks in, everything will be hunky-dory and she can continue her current living standards. But she's wondering if there's anything she can do to retire earlier. We already have that salary that's pulled through. So this is the gross salary. So I'll just toggle that on, save that. And within this fact find, there are lots of prompts and reminders for different kinds of expenses that a client might have. So typically when clients complete this, they can and tend to itemize their expenditure. So you will see sort of a different line for the gas versus electric, but you can also group them together. So you could add a combined motoring expense, for example, or a combined housing expense, which is what I've done here, housing and personal. The client's pension is pulled through from the back office. If I just click in to edit that, we can just be a bit more specific about what this is and just say this is her employer pension. And we can also add in any other bits of information here. I am just going to reduce this ever so slightly. There we go. Now, other assets. This feature is quite nice. We get nice feedback about this. So essentially, if earlier on we told the system under their addresses section that they own a property that is without a mortgage or with a mortgage, but they own the property. When you come to the other assets section, it'll have a pop-up box to ask you if you want to add the main residence in as an asset. So we have integrations with LandReg and property data. So LandReg will do your postcode lookup, so it will find the address for you, and the property data one will look at houses sold in the area and will give you, and will also know the cost of acquisition. So you get to see sort of what growth on the property has been over the years that it's been owned. So that's quite a nice feature. We can add in details of loans, mortgages, health and protection, as well as any protection policies that we currently have in place. We do also have an integration with iPipeline that will give an indicative quote on protection, which you can see here, which the client would also be able to see. And then at the very end, possibly the most important, we come to the client's objectives. So the client can go in and add in their own objectives, but the system will also offer some prompts. So in this case, the system knows the client has a dependent and no will or insurance, life insurance policy. So it will ask, would you like that to be a topic of discussion with your advisor? So I'll add those in as well. And here we'll say, when can I retire? So the client can then finish and review that information, and once they're happy with it, they can send it back to the advisor. And the few other bits that a client can engage with within this portal, you'll see here the net worth. This is a direct link to the net worth that sits here. So if we were to then make amendments in the CashCalc side, the next time the client logs in, this will update. The client can also upload documents for you. So we can go to My Uploads and they can upload some documents. They can also upload documents that are just for them as well. So if, for example, they wanted to use this as a space to keep all of their important financial documentation, they may want to upload their car insurance renewal documents. They don't really need to share that with you, their advisors. So they could upload that just for personal reference, just to keep everything in one spot. There's also two-way chat. So we can send a message to our advisor to say, all done. And that would prompt an email to yourself to say that this particular client has sent you a message via CashCalc. Log in and have a look at it. So the client has done everything that they need to do on the onboarding side of the system. There will now be a review process needed to be done, but before I go into that, I'm just going to quickly check if we've had any comments or questions come through on that initial process. Excellent. Nothing's come through, just a couple of people saying that you can hear me, so I'm glad I've not just been talking to myself for the last 28 minutes. Okay, so back into CashCalc as the advisor. If I refresh my page, I'll get a series of extra notifications just pop through, and we've also got that message as well. So here we have the client's message, all done. And then we have a bunch of different notifications, all relating to what Maria's just been doing on the portal. So you can click through each of these and it will take you to the relevant sections of the system, but you can also navigate the same via the top here. So if I go into the onboarding tab, the first thing to mention, which is I guess the compliance tick, is that we log all the activity that happens, and that is both activity via the portal from the advisor or power planner side, as well as the client's activity. This is then printable. Everything is date and time stamped, so you'll always have the record of having sent a document, client looking at a document, accepting a document, for example. Like, you can see these ones here, all of these document related actions. And this will just build and build and build and build over the years that you look after a client. So we have that. If I go over to the documents section, we can see one was declined. I can view the reason, have the conversation, and then resend it. And if we look at the fee agreement, if I view that document and just zoom in, this is the watermarking of that client having agreed to the document. So it is date and time stamped with the client's IP address and their email address. So it does contain all the information that you would see in a digital signature. It just doesn't have the squiggle. So we have lots of firms that use this as a compliant form of digital acceptance. It's just, of course, whether your compliance, it ticks that box. The ATRQ has come in and is complete and ready for review. So you can go in there, review that, and once you're happy, yeah, this is the right risk profile for this particular client, we can say they are indeed e-value risk level 3, and pop in a note as well. If I go back to the ATRQ there, that is now date timestamped closed off. So again, that attitude to risk questionnaire will remain in the system, so you will have it to go back to at a later date if you need to. And then for next year's review, if you need to review that, we can send a new questionnaire and have a new one completed at that stage. But from here, this is where the integration with analytics sort of works. Once we've got an ATRQ completed and closed off, you can export to analytics and then go through the, and it'll take you to the investment planner and go through that process there. We also have a fact find that is complete and ready to review, which is only going to give you the changes that have been made. So you're not going to have to review a client's date of birth every time they submit a fact find. It will only flag the changes. So in this case, it's giving me all of the new bits that were added. And if there was historic information, it will flag where the change is. So I know I made a change to that ISA. If I click into that, it will tell us, well, this was the information you held previously. This is the new information just submitted. Which of the two is correct? I'm going to tick that this is the correct one. And that's toggled on. If there was a mistake, you can go to the old one. But in this case, this is the correct figure. And we can save that information, which will update this net worth, which also means when the client logs in next, their net worth will have updated on the home page of that portal. So once you have this information, nobody wants to have to rekey that again. Your client has just gone through the effort of adding it all in. The last thing we want is you then having to type it again. So we don't have to do that. We can click update a calculator. We can choose to go to the gross cash flow modeler, create a new forecast, and in this case we're going to call it the current situation. And below are then all the different information points that are sending through. So we have the ISA pension salary as well as the expenses. And if I hit export, all those bits of information have come through. Now, there is quite a lot of extra bits I want to add in here. So under the inputs and timeline, we can work our way through each of these tabs, and that's really my advice to anybody that's using CashCalc, whether it's been 5 years or 5 minutes. Just work your way down these tabs. So under assumptions, we've got our inflation rates, how much surplus income we want to save. So if, for example, the client's expenditure is lower than their incomes during the working period of their life, the system by default will assume we want to accrue all of that surplus money. I've had a conversation with this particular client. They are contributing to their ISA. They have pension contributions going on also, but month on month, if there's anything left over, it tends to end up being eaten up by life. So I'm going to change that to say, no, we're not saving any surplus income. But if we are saving surplus income, you can choose which pot to save that into. If it's an ISA and the surplus income surpasses the standard £20,000 a year contribution, the system will flag that to you as needing addressing. If you are contributing surplus income into a pension, it will assume it is a personal contribution and will gross it up for tax relief. But in this case, the client is not saving any surplus income. People and timeline. We have the client who's based in England. If we do have Scottish advisors on the call, we've got your tax regime covered, so just make sure you click into Scotland. And then we have our events timeline at the bottom. Now, this events timeline is particularly useful for clients that are pre-retirement, but it can be used for everybody. If we take retirement as an example, there are so many financial changes that happen at that point. We might stop with our work-related expenses, our salary is going to stop, our pension contributions are going to stop, our cash savings are probably going to stop being contributed into, and we might start taking drawdown at that stage as well. And then we could decide to retire 5 years earlier than we'd originally planned, or work on an extra 3 years. So what this enables us to do is link all of those things, salary, work-related expenses, contributions, to the event on the timeline rather than fixed at an age. So if this client does retire at 65, all we'd need to do is move retirement and all of those other things will shift with it. So I'm going to keep that on there for now. Now, a bit of background about this particular client. So Mary, she's 61. She's fairly confident with retiring at 67 and a few spending adjustments. She'll be able to maintain her current standard of living to a degree. But she's got a very big property and the daughter's moving out soon, and she's thinking, well, why don't I just downsize, use some of that money, and I could retire earlier again. So that's what we're gonna model. So we're gonna model the effects of continuing as she is currently versus doing this downsizing exercise and releasing some capital out the property. So we've got the information that we dragged in. It will drag in the information that it knows. So this Aberdeen ISA, for example, when I built it in IO, I'm not using IO as well as most advisors are, obviously. I didn't put any growth assumptions in there, so it doesn't know that information. So I'm just going to come in here and input some growth assumptions. We have a couple of options. We can either choose to just put a linear return. We're assuming 5% year on year, and the system will offset inflation against that. So it is inflation linked. But if we get to our pensions, we could, on the growth side of things, choose variable growth templates as well. So rather than just assuming an average, assuming 5 year on year, we can assume an average of about 5.2, but we're not going to get that every year. We're going to have some volatility, and this is a 34-year variable growth template using UT sector data. So if you were a cautious investor between the years of 1990 and 2024, this is the sort of growth you'd have experienced. Of course, this data comes from FE Analytics, and each complete year that ends, we add an extra year on. So this variable growth template is just getting bigger and bigger. So back to the savings and investments, we have our Aberdeen ISA in here. If we wanted to add things just directly into the cash flow, we absolutely can. So I'm going to add in Mary's emergency cash. This is a cash pot, but you can see here we have all the different wrapper types there. And in this pot, she does have £10,000. And it is cash. I'm just going to leave it at 2%. It's a low return fixed pot. At the bottom here, you can add in any income that the client receives from interest. So you can also choose whether that is reinvested or not. But for this particular client with an £80,000 salary, it's going to treat the personal savings allowance, it's going to reduce that down to £500, and anything above that, we'll assume the tax is paid on it, and the interest will be taxed. Pensions, again, I'm just going to go in and give a bit of information here. So in this case, this pension is not an inherited pension, but if it was and therefore tax-free, you could specify that at this stage. The pot is fully uncrystallised, and if it's not, we would need the uncrystallised pot value, and that's just so we tax it correctly later on, or don't give too little, too much tax-free cash. I am going to choose a variable growth template here. You can see lots of different options. We've recently gone live with our phase 3 of the analytics CashCalc integration. So if you have portfolios in analytics, you can now send that data to CashCalc to create variable growth templates. It really does sort of bring your CIP, CRP to life. Oh, something went wrong. But yeah, we can bring that information through now, which is kind of the big thing that we were all hoping when CashCalc was first brought under the FE Fundinfo umbrella. And if you do have those, these would sit in your portfolios section. And these are ones that I've pulled through based on actual portfolio data in analytics. But for this particular example, the client is a balanced investor. I'll pop that in, and we're gonna get this variable growth. We also have the state pension, which knows the current value of the state pension and when this client would start receiving it. But if there are any adjustments needed, you can just change that. And we are soon to be, well, one of the big projects that we're currently working on is having specific inputs in this page for DB incomes. So for any DB pensions, you'll be able to add these in, and that's currently being built. I saw some mock-ups yesterday. It's looking really good. So yeah, stay tuned on that one. So one of the developments that we had go live this year, I think this is my favourite of the new developments we've had go live, is in the income section, you can at this stage add in details of the pension contributions. So we have here a salary that's £80,000. We can add in information about bonuses, benefits in kind, company cars, all that stuff. And the system will automatically assume it's going to end at sort of 67 unless we add it to this retirement event. And this is what's going to enable me to drag it up and down the timeline. So I need this to be linked to the event rather than just the age. And then at the bottom, we can include our pension contributions from salary. If a client has multiple pension pots, you can choose which one it's going to. In this case, the Aviva personal pension. They are contributing salary sacrifice, and the client's very good. She does 10% of her income. You can include the national insurance savings if the employer does that, but in this case they don't. And you can also add in the employer's contribution. So again, let's say another great employer, they also contribute 10%. So once you've added that in, the system has actually auto-created our contributions. So we now have 10% of the salary going in, 10% of the salary going in. Employer and employee contributions are split out, so the system will do that for you. And I'll show a bit more on the results side what that's actually done to the salary as well. We have our expenses, just ongoing expenses. Transfers is another feature that went live this year. We've had about 6 or 7 sort of big changes to the gross cash flow this year. So we're averaging 0.8 a month. But yeah, we've got more to come before the end of this year. This transfers feature, so this is really useful if you've got a pension consolidation case, if you're doing a bed and ISA, bed and pension exercise. But essentially you can just choose which pot we're transferring money from, which pot we're transferring it to, and then a percentage or nominal amount and how often that happens. You can also use it for spousal transfer as well if you've got a joint client. But yeah, essentially it's moving money from one pot to another. Contributions, as I say, we've already added these pension ones in, but the client also contributes let's say 250 per month, which realistically is going to stop when she retires, and that's going into her ISA. And you'll see as well, we've got this external tick or not. So it's not ticked for this because it is a direct transfer from the client's current account into the ISA. So it is a personal contribution. Now we can go in and add the withdrawals. We can say when the client retires, she's going to take this from this pot, this from this pot, etc. But the system will also do it for you. It will assume based on a liquidation order which pot to take money from to meet any shortfall if there is shortfall. And we can also add in our charges. So I'll add in charges. This is pension. And I'm just going to group everything together and put a 1.2 charge per annum running until the end of the forecast. So if we go to the cash flow model now, we've got a couple of graphs to look at. We have the savings over time. So in this case, we have this ISA. We then have the pension. If you hover over any of the bars, it'll sort of tell you what's going on in that year for that client. And then sitting on the top, we have this emergency cash, which is, though it's not being spent until very, very late in the forecast, you can see it nominally decreasing. And this is just with that inflation erosion going on. But even if Mary continues as she is, really, it's looking like we're gonna start struggling on the financial side around age 90. But she has already said she's very aware that the older she gets, she's probably going to end up reducing her spending. So we can go in and model that as well. Let's say the personal expenses are probably going to run until, let's put it to about 77. And then from 77, the lifestyle expenses are probably going to reduce to, say, 1,500 per month from 77 until the end. Add that in. And if we come to the savings over time chart now, that's actually given her quite a few more years, and is probably a bit more realistic as well. So the other graph that we have is our money in versus money out. So this is the actual cash flow of a client. So we've got our total expenditure in black, which is dropping down later in retirement. We have her salary here, which you can see has been adjusted for tax and pension contributions. State pension kicking in later on. And then as per the liquidation order, we are taking from the ISA to cover shortfall first. And then we're going into the pension, and the system will default to taking UFPLS where it can. as soon as all the tax-free cash is gone, it will flick over to Flexi Access. But in this case, UFPLS, and then that emergency cash is the last to be spent. So I appreciate I have slightly gone over, so this session is recorded, and I will continue for everybody who is remaining on the call. I reckon I'll probably be about 10 more minutes. So I'll continue. I do apologise for going over, but yeah, I'll carry on. If anybody does need to go, I won't be offended. The other graph that we get as part of this this gross cash flow is a taxes graph. So this will capture all the tax that we cover. So you'll be able to see capital gains if we do have a GIA in here and we're paying any capital gains tax. And we'll also have our income tax, national insurance added in there. Now, for me, where this gross cash flow modeler really sort of comes into itself compared to the net is the yearly breakdown. So the level of detail that you get in this section, yeah, I just think it's brilliant. So what we're looking at, which does look a bit chaotic, but it does make sense, is essentially the savings at the start of each year, the savings at the end of each year, and everything that happened in between to get from those points. So if we pick a year where the client is still working, for example, we have our salary here, we have adjusted the taxable earnings as a result of that salary sacrifice pension contribution setup. We'll then show you how much of this salary has landed in personal allowance, how much basic rate and how much tax is being paid as a result of that, and how much higher rate tax is being paid as well. So it gives you that level of detail and essentially shows you how we've calculated this in the background, so you can be reassured that the numbers are all there. Money out is our expenditure. Liquid assets sort of breaks down each of the different pots that we've got and gives you an overview as to how contributions, charges, withdrawals, inflation, growth, how all of those things have affected a specific pot. So the pension's a good one to look at in this case. We can see the contributions, the growth that's been applied, and the end value there. People would just give some insights on the people, and insights for any years where you see one of these tags here. This is where you'll see that there's an insight. So we have insights for a couple of different things, MPAA in this case, but we do also have insights for if there's an onshore or offshore bond and there's a chargeable event, that'll also flag up as an insight here to say chargeable event in this year. Yeah. So this is the client's current situation. And as I said, they're toying with the idea of downsizing and using a bit of that money to bridge the gap and retire earlier. So if I clone my forecast and call this retire next year, so at the moment we now have two forecasts that are pretty much, well, they're identical apart from the name on the front of them. So we've got current situation at the top, retire next year here. Now the only change I need to do is go to the people and timeline and drag retirement. If I hop to my income, that now knows it's finishing at the retirement age, which has now been changed to 62. The same for the contributions, they've all shifted as well. So if we go to our cash flow model, obviously if we retired next year without having sold the property and released some equity, this is sort of the situation. So I'm going to make another clone. Sorry, I'm choking on something, but I'm okay. So let's call this retire next year and downsize. So I can choose which forecast I want to retire. I want to clone. And in this forecast, this method that I'm going to show you, it works well for any instance where you have a client that's receiving a large injection of capital in the future. So it could be an inheritance, it could be proceeds of a property sale, yeah, anything like that. But what I'm going to do is go to my savings and investments. I'm going to call this pot proceeds from property sale. And I'm going to call this, we're going to put this in the GIA. The original invested sum is nothing. And the current starting pot value is also nothing. At the moment, this is just an empty pot waiting for the money to come in. But when that money does come in, I want to apply that benchmark again, balanced investor. I'll add that in. Now under contributions, I'm going to add a contribution to the property sale. First of all, I'm going to add an event on the timeline and link it to this. Then under contributions, proceeds from property. It is an external source, i.e. it's not coming from the client's current account, so we'll make sure that's ticked on. And the client currently has a 1.2 mil property, and she's thinking if she moves to a 700k property, that should give her enough of the proceeds and still enjoy a bit in the first couple of years as well. So I'm going to put the net proceeds, I'm going to put it at 400 just to be on the safe side. 400,000, which would of course be a one-off, and I'm linking it to my downsizing event. Add that in. Now if we go to cash flow, we should see a slight change, which we absolutely do. So up until the point of so the client finishes this year working, we're then spending that ISA in the first couple of years. We have already had that injection of capital go into the GIA. We are then going on to our pension, and once that's all been spent, we move on to the GIA and use that to cover shortfall, which then brings us in some capital gains tax. And if we also go to the yearly breakdown, we'll also get that insight here. Withdrawal from an unwrapped investment and capital gains is being captured there. So once you are happy, you can also see in this state, in this graph as well, we can see all the assets that she has at the moment, and then in a couple of years' time, that GIA sort of pops out of nowhere when the money's put in there, and yeah. So in this case, downsizing feels like the right idea for the client. Far less hoovering as well, so everybody's winning. And then once you've got everything and you're happy with all of that, we can just go to create a report. We can choose to include all of those forecasts or just the one. I will just include the one for now. And for a one forecast report, you're looking at about 12 pages. And it'll come with a summary. It will then show you all of those inputs that you added in, your assumptions, savings, investments, income, expenses, etc. And then it will give you the graphs. So we've got our money in versus money out, savings over time, tax and the non-expanded version of the yearly breakdown. Excellent. So that concludes our session. Again, sorry I did go over a little bit. I'm just going to address some of the questions that I think have been popping in as I've been going. But yeah, thank you so much for coming along. Where's my... There we go. So we do offer some other training sessions. The demo day Wednesday, for example, it's not always CashCalc related content. So yeah, feel free to have a look and join another session. And yeah, you can add me on LinkedIn if you like. So let me just have a look at some of these questions. So do we have a time frame for the DB schemes being added? So I can loosely say it's going to be this year. So this side of Christmas. I know that's still sort of a 3-month time frame, but this side of Christmas is what we're working towards. And the IHT calculator, yeah. So our IHT calculator is temporarily off air. It's in Dev Hospital at the moment. So I need to actually chase on an update. I don't at this stage off the top of my head know where things are with that. It will absolutely be coming back. It's just having some dev work, and the long-term goal is actually to bring IHT calculations into the gross cash flow modeler. So there'll be quite a bit of development to make that happen. There needs to be a couple of stages before that, right? So at the moment, we don't have things like death benefit or properties in the gross cash flow. So those will be coming first, and that's all gearing us up to be able to do IHT in the gross modeler. But yeah, the standalone tool will also come as well. Will there be the option to make one change across different scenarios rather than having to manually amend for 4 or 5? So this is in relation to, let's say you build your base forecast, and let's say you forgot to add a specific charge in, and then you clone and you have 5 forecasts. If you then want to add that charge in, you have to add it 5 times across each of the forecasts. So I assume this is in relation to, if you've got a base forecast, you could just click, yeah, apply this to all of them. Yes, this is something we're exploring. I can't say for certain that we've started building it, but I know that there are definitely discussions happening about being able to combat that exact sort of feedback that we've had. Excellent. So I'll hang around for a couple extra minutes in case there are any other questions. Failing that, thank you so much for coming along. I think I've answered all of the questions that have come through as they've gone. So we'll send out the recording. And yeah, I hope everybody has a lovely rest of the day. I have had another question come in. Would I ask the cash flow model to take from a client's taxable income rather than tax-free cash? This would be useful for those who are retired and yet to reach state pension age. Yeah, so if that's so when I built this forecast, I didn't tell the system the withdrawal strategy. I allowed the system to use the default, which is, if I go to savings and investments or pensions, the default, if it's not told otherwise, is to look at this liquidation order, which you can reorder, and hit one pot until that's empty, move on to the next, etc., etc. But if that's not the method you want, the other assumptions it uses as well is when it gets to a pension, if it's going if it's using a pension to take shortfall, to cover shortfall, it will try to do UFPLS before anything else. Now, if you don't want that, this is where you would have to come into your withdrawals, add a withdrawal, and specify that when we're taking from the pension, flexi access, the system will say there has to be crystallized funds in order for that withdrawal to work, and you can specify there then that we're taking the taxable portion. And there are a couple of different options. You can also choose to take, you know, all the PCLS first if that's another method. But yeah, the default is UFPLS, but if it's told to do otherwise, it'll do that. Excellent. Thank you so much. If there are any questions after this, please do reach out to our customer support team, or if you've got a key contact here, reach out that way. And yeah, I hope everybody has a lovely rest of the day and rest of the week. Take care.